It's not going for
No, I know. I was comfortable saying that because I know you're not going to say it.
The two bearded wonders are here.
Yes.
Welcome back, and I've done what I love to do, turn on the recording before anybody knows. And so we are back. Part 2 with Kevin Smith and Seth Creekmore.
Hello.
Our type 5 with a 4-wing and a type 4 with a 5-wing. And our disclaimer that none of us are our numbers. We all know this. We are not our types, but we do have a center of gravity, and we talk about them in these terms, so we'll know what we're talking about. So, boy, go back and listen to part 1. We were on a roll, but we're talking about processing emotions with a thinking propensity and thinking with the heart propensity. So I want to ask Seth to kind of pick up where we left off.
Yeah, so what you were saying about your emotions get caught in your head, I kind of want to interview a little bit on that, because I have something on the reversal of that, the mirror image of that. So when you say emotions get caught in your head, what does that look like? What does that mean?
I don't sit and feel them. It would probably be, and by I say I don't, I should say I didn't, because that has taken a big shift in the last probably 14, 15 months. Instead of trying to make the feeling go away or the emotion go away and be resolved, because I like how you described earlier about the emotion being in the head or in the intellect or the mind, the brain. We're experiencing a certain way for 2 minutes, and then it gets shoved somewhere. Mm-hmm. Where does it get shoved? That's a very interesting question to explore. But when I do that, when I shove it somewhere else, it pops out, not just in relationships, not just in my interactions with people or in my professional career, but it pops out in my own physical body. Mm-hmm. And so part of listening to my body and understanding where I'm hurting, why I'm hurting physically, and tracing that back into the emotion, and then really going all the way back to it to find out what I didn't feel whenever I had that emotion. Mm-hmm. Instead, I replaced those feelings with thoughts. Mm-hmm. And I was able to think myself into a corner, really, but the corner felt safe at the time.
Mm-hmm. And logical, right?
Yes, very logical.
It made sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you were saying earlier how you don't want to express your emotions because you're afraid that people understand your thoughts.
Yes.
Or is it the reversal?
It was reinforced that people didn't understand my brain. Mm-hmm. And the words, it's not just used for 5s, but it's used for a few types, maybe more than others, but is that you're too much. Mm-hmm. It's too much. And so when I'm talking or going too deep, people are like, oh, you're blowing my mind. It's too much. And while they may, and I expect they do mean it as a compliment, like, whoa, I can't even begin to touch where you're going. It's overwhelming to me. I don't hear it from the place I think they mean it. It kind of just pokes at my insecurities that I'm being rejected because I'm weird for being able to go that deep or for being able to think these thoughts. And so then I shut down, or I think people don't know how to take me. Weird energy has been one word that's been used. I'm like, I can't do anything with weird energy. Like, what are you talking about, weird?
I have the exact, not opposite, but I guess it's just the reversal. It's the mirror image of that, where someone asks me how I'm doing, and that is just it's a multifaceted answer. So like, even when people ask me simple questions, I'm like, okay, what level do you want me to answer at? And then oftentimes people aren't patient enough to hear the answer and let me like sift through all the stuff in order to get to trying to answer their question as authentically and truly as possible.
So if someone said, how you doing today? You would not say, fine.
No, I would.
You would, I guess, because
I don't expect people. I'm weird in that I will tell you how existentially I'm doing right now, but I know you don't want to hear that. So it's this sort of like, if I sense you don't want to hear that, then I'm going to shut down. And I'm like, it's happened multiple times in group situations where someone will ask me a question, I'm trying to answer, and then I get interrupted, and then they move on to another subject. I'm like, well, I'm not going to try to force myself back in there. Like, obviously they don't actually want to know.
No, well, maybe they don't. I don't assume what anybody wants to know, but this is why this has been such an important journey for me personally, and I know for you guys too, is because it's like Doug refers to the Rosetta Stone work. And if I come in and I try to talk to you with my language and you try to explain to me in a foreign language, I don't think it's that I don't want to know. It's that I don't understand. I can't comprehend what that is. That is why this has been such a lesson in just being still, which is so far from my natural bent. Still is, it's like, that's a scary thing, or it was. I'm so much happier now and at peace to be still and sit with my 4 books. I might actually finish a whole one, but it's like, oh, what's in that one? What's in that one? No, but what I'm saying is the journey of being able to look at, this is how you think, and it's beautiful. And I can read it in a book and kind of get a flavor, but to be with you and give myself permission to go, okay, you are in the ESOL, the English as a second language class, stop. Listen with the ears that are trying to learn a new language. And I've said this before. I've had a couple other 4s on the podcast. And when you do the test, which we all love to say, don't do the test, but we all do the test. 4 was my absolute lowest number. So I've called it my blind spot. And where I find the beauty of the Enneagram is now not being, afraid of your energy. I'm actually wanting to hear more because I can communicate and not feel like I don't understand what you're saying anymore, because I want to learn. Same, I feel like I'm closer to you because I want to learn. I mean, as far as, on the number, because I love knowledge. I love learning. And it's hard. I don't ever want to stop learning. But the next thing comes along and I want to study quantum physics, because I saw a great TV show. It's like, oh, I'm going to do this and I'll be a quantum physicist in my spare time. But that, I'm being silly, but to understand the language that those around me are speaking, it has been life-changing. And what it has meant for me is really, I'm learning to be quiet more. My family would say, she's lying. She never shuts up. But I'm learning to be okay with that energy. So, yeah, when I ask, how you are, and my other friends, one in particular, Kelly, it's like you open a door in my heart that I did not know was safe to go in. I think I knew it was there, but I didn't know it was safe. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And so, like, what I'm hearing from you is silence has a fear factor to it.
Oh, very much.
Because
it's not good on a podcast. Okay. Because it's always been my nature to fill the silence. So, because I assumed other people were uncomfortable if there was silence. And I think I just said this maybe on the last one that I talked about, with my friend Thomas, who's a 4, and he has this gift of meeting total strangers and getting to the heart and becoming, like best friends, as they jokingly say. But because what he says is everyone has a story, they just need someone to listen to it. And so for me taking the opposite and not assuming that I'm the one who, if you're quiet, then you must want to know something. But, you need a story, so I'll share mine. Well, that just shut down the opportunity to get to know, to give you the space to come forward with whatever you want to say. And silence is not a fearful thing for you.
No. It's a beautiful
No.
thing.
In fact, when we were out on the porch last year, Doug asked you about Simon and Garfunkel. What was the song?
Sound of Silence.
Sounds of Silence. Thank you, Kevin. Hello. So Doug asked you, how do you feel when you hear that song? And do you remember what you said?
I rarely do.
Well, it was one of those that stuck in my brain like, oh, that's so profound. You said it's like a warm blanket. It's like wrapping up in a warm blanket. And so I have always had the need to fill the silence.
Does it feel like a
With something.
vacuum to you, Danae? That silence is a vacuum that has to be filled. As soon as you pop that cap open, something's going to rush in. So,
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Oh, that's scary. This is not therapy, you guys.
we turn the tables.
Oh,
Careful when you invited 4 and 5 to the table.
It's going to happen.
I want a pinata.
It's an interesting note. If you get too deep on a 5, he might flip the tables on you. She might flip the tables on you and start to make you feel uncomfortable.
Well, I listened to the podcast with the other 4.
Kelly?
No.
Tom?
Yes. The story person.
It doesn't come out till tomorrow. Unless you listen to it today, because it kind of got released early.
Yes.
Did you listen today?
I did listen today, yes.
Oh, aren't you ahead of the game?
Yes. Where was I going with that? This can be edited out.
You said you were listening. Thomas, the storyteller.
Oh. So I was listening to the podcast that just came out with Tom, the storytelling, and he mentioned something, and I completely resonate with it, of just oftentimes the question asking, as much as I am actually, yes, interested in your story, and I think Kevin can relate as well, of like, it's turning the attention and the energy away from me, and because I'm afraid that you won't be able to handle me, so I just put all my energy towards you, get you like talking about yourself, you're all over here. And this is the whole thing of the Enneagram, is your only job, even if you don't know anything about your number or any other number, is to take every thought, emotion, and action or instinct, and define what is ego and what is essence, and to use that as a way to process what needs to happen next. And because everything has a little bit of ego and a little bit of essence. There's I maybe I'm wrong, but at least in my life, like, that is the way I can always find a small, like, I'm also doing this because of this too. But that doesn't make it bad. It just means, like, as long as I'm aware of that, and that's job well done. Like,
It's what I think Doug uses the term when we're talking in other areas. Is it self as source or spirit as source?
mm-hmm.
And it's what you're saying. It's the ego or essence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I have heard very good wisdom teachers say that they don't have an ego anymore. And I don't agree with that. I don't think that's, not only is it not possible, it's here for a reason.
It's a tragedy if you don't have an ego.
No, exactly.
It's a tragedy.
It's like not having a check engine light on your car.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was Dr. Joseph Howell said, like, the ego is the thing that helps you get up and get dressed in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we want you to please be dressed. So what? Yeah, to say you're rid of it means you're also ridding part of your existence in some regard.
I agree with that. I think you are unconscious.
Or the will to existence.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't even want to be here if my ego isn't. If I'm not, I am my ego. There's a part of me that's lost, and if I lose that crucial part of me that has been with me since I was, then I don't feel at home in my body anymore. I think it was a lot of what happened to me a little over a year ago. I lost touch with my ego, and people always try to put that down and say, hey, it's too ego driven, too much ego. And while that's a very real possibility, we see narcissism and some other things that factor into that. But without an ego, you're going to lose your identity. You need it. Much like a child, it has to find its place, but it's very valuable.
Right. And there's a lot of confusion, I believe, not misconception or confusion about the word ego. It's really relatively new in the conversations that we have now. So, it's like, I liked what Doug says, is it spirit as source or is it self? So when I say my ego is myself, it's the self as source. It's what I'm doing is to serve me. And to drop the ego doesn't mean we'll lose it. It's to let this essence, to let our true selves come to the surface. That's why the journey is, it's like, I think we were talking upstairs and when somebody says, well, describe what's your faith? If your faith is in science or your faith is in whatever it is, what is your faith? Just tell me quickly, what's your faith? What's your faith type? So, well, it's something I'll be figuring out the rest of my life because it grows. That's the hope of starting on a journey with the Enneagram, is that you don't just grab some random test and say, oh, okay, that's what I am, and use that as an excuse or as a weapon against somebody else. That's why he does this. Oh, well, he's a this, he's a that. But to say, I'm going to start out on this journey and it's going to be a long one because I want to take all the energy that is offered to me in this life and say, what next? What next? It's like we were talking about on the couch, what we're doing now, because we're talking about your music. And you said, well, for now, but isn't that what all of life is? It's where we are now. Speaking of, let's do a little commercial. Tell me about your music. Because y'all, the man is
it's hip hop.
An artist.
Hip hop is coming out, right?
Hip hop opera with a twist of bluegrass.
Thematic opera.
Yeah. No, I call myself a cinematic folk artist. Just because I believe in the power of storytelling and of like just the intimateness of folk, the dirty grassrootsiness of folk, but there's also I'm constantly drawn back to orchestral, classical, just really highly cinematic elements to my music, just because in my range of emotion there is the deep and the earthy and the dirty and the and then there's these like just these high flying strings and flutes and oboes and just a swirling about overhead. And how else do you create a world if you only have one small section of that world? So that's my music, is an attempt to create a world within your brain as you listen. And so
and if you ever have Creek to your house, just have a little box that he can put his shoes in. And then I sent you that text about, going barefoot. And the first time he was here at my house, it was, I'm not kidding. I don't think it was 35 degrees. It was so cold. It might have not been freezing.
But weren't you shirtless too in that, on that album? Did I see that correctly?
So,
or was it just a skin-colored shirt?
Growing up in Indiana, you kind of get used to the cold, and for some reason, the cold brings me into my body like nothing else does. It demands my attention, and it clears my head. It gives me energy, and there's just something about being bare to the elements.
Oh,
That really just fills my soul and
such a
connects me
four
to-
language. Such four. But I looked outside and you were standing in the backyard,
Yes.
no shirt and no shoes, and it was just so cold. And I wanted to go out and rescue him and just go, come on, get a shirt on, get some.
He had a warm blanket with him. It was
Oh, sounds of silence.
Yes. Yes. Well, and it's interesting. So I do a lot of cold exposure things, and it's been a practice even in like trying. Even as a 4, I have a ton of emotions, but I actually don't always feel them either, and that's part of the problem. And this practice of becoming in my body and like exposing myself to extreme temperatures. The only way you're able to continue to stay in that cold water or whatever is to be curious about the sensation and not identify it as painful, because it's just information that your body's sending you. So to be curious about the sensation, it's like, what color is it? What
Kevin and
shape
I
is
are
it?
looking at each other like,
It works for me. So
see, I want to accept that energy.
yeah.
I find it fascinating.
But you talk about curiosity. That's really what the look is about. I think, and I keep coming back to this, but curiosity seems to be the thing that is missing so much. When presence goes away, you fail in curiosity. You just put it down. Maybe it's overwhelming. Maybe it's too much, and that's okay for a time. But if you put curiosity on hold for too long, then you really start to lose out and stagnate. Maybe go to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're talking about. You're talking about waking up in your body by being curious about pain.
Yeah.
How far do we take that? You know?
That's another conversation.
Okay, so my takeaway in this conversation is I will allow myself to be more curious about the silent space.
Yes.
That's
And
I'm making that, what do you call a declaration that I will. And I know, Kevin, you talk about mindfulness, and I think some of your work involves, your new work actually involves mindful practices, mindfulness. Am I right?
Yes,
and yoga,
Mhm. Well,
things like that.
I don't do yoga. Actually, I've started doing yoga for the first time in the last 2 weeks, which has been quite an experience. Stretching my body. It does not feel like my body was made to be stretched. But yoga has been
You need to lean into that pain.
I do. You're right. This is a good conversation with Creek to be curious about the pain going on. But the starting point was that the emotions were overwhelming and I was getting tangled up in my thoughts. And so it led me to my body. And so then I can start to stretch that out of my body, and it starts to surface in really weird ways. I'll start breathing through it, and then emotions pop up and I'm crying. I don't even know why. And the lesson there is to sit with it, to be curious about what's coming up and why it's coming up, and to let it flow. To try to stop it and make that go away has been what got me in a very dark place.
That's, I knew what you were. Yeah, and I didn't want to go any more into the personal information, but that just, I think I could just ask this without being too personal.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. But when you got to the deepest part, and you already said it, so I'll say it. You considered, or you attempted suicide.
Yes,
Did it make sense to you in your brain?
It was. People have asked me
'Cause that's
since
what
then that knew.
It sounded like that's what you were saying.
Yeah, it did. But people asked me, like, was it just an attempt? And I told them, you don't take 215 milligrams of morphine on an attempt. Why I'm here is what I'm really curious about. I think I've answered some of those questions, but the question still needs to be explored for me. I didn't intend on waking up. I was found 6 hours later. That's more than enough time for that medication to take effect. And it wasn't the only medication. There were other things involved as well. It was a very meticulously planned event for me. And it was one that I wanted to make sure I was doing it in a way where I wouldn't experience pain and it would be final. And so without going into too much detail or glorifying it, it isn't something I'm proud of. It is just part of my story. And from that, one of the most beautiful things has happened in my relationship with Nan, where she's taught me how to be able to admit my emotions, to feel my emotions and work through them. And practicing those presence processes gets me out of it. But at the time, I don't have any desire really to live. It was a relief for me to think about death. It was a welcoming thing. I'm done. I'm just done. That's all. I'm not depressed. Clinically, you could diagnose it as depression. It was, right? But I don't feel depressed. I feel overwhelmed and like I can't do anything else. And for people who are trying to rationalize this and say, why would you do this to yourself? And I don't know that it'll ever make sense on this side of it. People going through it, it does click with why you might do that. But it's not clear thinking. It's not healthy thinking, but it is thinking. And it's a corner that you can box yourself into pretty easy. At low levels, right? How many times do you rebuild a life that has fallen apart? How many times are you misunderstood and rejected? How many times are you accused and blamed before I just, it's very nihilistic. And fives can tend to go at lower levels of health, can go toward nihilism and, schizophrenia and other things.
And that's why you use the term lower levels.
Yeah.
That's why we talk about this as a growth, a journey, is because in the Enneagram, and this is just, again, this is one tool, but within this journey, we talk about the different levels, and there's 9 levels. And so the lower 3 would be the unhealthiest. The middle 3, which, most people reside there, hopefully at least there. The middle 3 levels would be the average. And then so the upper 3 would be when you really are learning to drop the attachment to the ego and fall into what you are, your essence, as Seth calls it. And that's why I love this journey, because we can literally look at this path and in the readings, in the books, and go, I see where I was. I thought like this. And it all made sense years ago. I functioned out of a lower level. So to be able to see where you were, where your thinking was, and acknowledge that you were in an unhealthy state, and have a path, have a trajectory to say, this is my growth path. Mm-hmm. That's why there's such power in a personal development tool, such as the Enneagram. Therapy, there's other, I always try to say that this is not the be-all, end-all salvation to all mankind, but it's a beautiful path because you can see where you are. You are here. Drop a pin in it. So I want to just wrap this up. My gosh, I know you guys have to drive to the other side of Georgia, all the way from Decula, but tell me, in the last few minutes we have, what do you love about being able to say, I'm a type 5 and I'm a type 4? And
who first?
Whoever wants to go first. Come on, Creek, you go. Say it.
What do I love about my number? Silent.
I know, I didn't say anything.
Good job.
It's comfortable, isn't it?
No, it's terrible.
Oh, man. I guess the thing for me that I really, I'm thankful that I have perspective on as a 4, is that I can find, there's an infinite depth within everything. Taking something as simple as this glass of water next to me and finding the beauty and the wonder and the infinite amount of possibilities this thing has for potential. And I can do that with anything and everything. Sometimes it's hard to do that for myself. But it's my gift to bring to the world, is to take everything and craft it into something a little bit more beautiful.
thank you for sharing that and for taking the time and sitting in that silence for a moment. Thank you.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
What about you, Kevin?
I've talked about if there's a tool to describe the 5, it would be a flashlight. For the longest time, I've felt the responsibility for me was to show up with the light so people could see. I've also talked about how at lower levels of health, it's tempting, and it even happens when a 5 will point that flashlight in people's eyes so that the only person who can see is the 5 holding the flashlight. It's a very hard thing for me to admit that that's happened, but it has. I can use my intellect and my wit to confuse or blind people where it should be used to serve and point the way for people to see things that they were missing so they won't stumble or trip. But in fact, the opposite happens at low levels of health, and it's a little bit of a burden to bear. But I think the most profound thing that I've learned about being a 5 is that when I turn the flashlight, not on the ground, not in people's eyes, but rather on myself, and then I start to feel, not see, because I'm not seeing anything at that point. Others see me, and then I start to feel the love that surrounds me, and then I start to hear the things that they say about how valuable and important I am and what I bring to the table. It has really shifted me from having to rely so heavily on my head and come down into my chest cavity that is not anywhere near empty, right? My head is always full, but I haven't really spent a lot of time in my chest where my heart is, and there's a really beautiful energy down there that I can open up and share with the world. And when that happens, I start to see my worth and my value. And there's a relief there now that it isn't a burden for me to carry this flashlight. It's a tool that's useful for others to see. And the thing they're supposed to be seeing isn't always the path in front of them. It's the me in front of them. And when I'm clear about who I am, people respond very well and very compassionately to that.
Okay. Oh, I love you guys. I love that. This has been wow, this has been great. Thank you. Ooh. Okay, I gotta go turn on Friends, something to make me laugh. Thank you guys so much, so much. I've learned so much, and I love being on this journey with you. I know you have spent so much time and continue to spend time learning to love who you are. And I love you both. Thank you.
Thank you.